This video examines Black Eagle versus SAC and Fox Nation Gaming Commission. The case revolves around tribal jurisdiction to regulate skill-based gaming devices operated by a tribal member on fee simple land within the reservation. The program overview highlights three key areas: tribal sovereignty, gaming regulation, and fee land jurisdiction. We will evaluate the authority of tribal nations and jurisdictional frameworks for gaming devices versus the Montana Doctrine. The core legal issue is determining tribal jurisdiction to regulate skill-based gaming devices on fee simple land. This creates a tension between individual property rights and the collective sovereignty of the nation under the Montana Doctrine. The appellant, Elias Black Eagle, argues that fee simple status limits tribal regulatory reach and his devices are not IGRA Class 3 gaming. The respondent, the Gaming Commission, asserts inherent tribal sovereignty to regulate gaming and protect tribal welfare. The case geography is a 5-acre restricted fee simple parcel within the reservation boundaries. This restricted status is the central conflict point regarding tribal versus individual authority over the land. Black Eagle operates a drive-through tobacco and convenience store on this parcel. The store primarily specializes in non-gaming merchandise. The appellant claims the right to develop his fee simple property, asserting tribal regulatory reach is limited to trust lands. The dispute began in early 2023 when Black Eagle installed 16 skill-based gaming terminals. The Gaming Commission immediately issued a cease and desist order, classifying the devices as unregulated Class 3 gaming. The Commission formalized its position by issuing a cease and desist order to halt operations, classifying the devices as unregulated Class 3 gaming under IGRA, triggering enforcement actions and establishing the legal foundation for the litigation. The nation's jurisdictional claim rests on inherent tribal sovereignty, asserting the authority to regulate gaming across all lands within the reservation. The Commission argues unregulated Class 3 devices threaten economic integrity and public welfare. There are two main issues on appeal. The first is jurisdiction over fee simple land. The second is the legal classification of the devices under IGRA, determining if they are unregulated, Class 3 gaming, or permissible skill-based enterprises. Appellant's first point of error concerns the Montana presumption, arguing against tribal civil jurisdiction over non-member activities on fee simple land. They contend that expanding jurisdiction creates a, quote, checkerboard of uncertainty and violates due process. Montana versus United States establishes a baseline rule that inherent tribal sovereign powers do not extend to non-members on fee lands, with narrow exceptions for consensual relationships or threats to tribal welfare. Strat versus A-1 Contractors reinforces this by limiting tribal court jurisdiction over non-members on alienated land, treating land held in right-of-way by the state as non-Indian fee land under the Montana framework. Brindale versus Yakima further restricted tribal zoning authority over non-member fee lands. For a tribe to regulate, the activity must pose a demonstrably serious threat, a catastrophic threshold, to the nation's political integrity or health. The appellant's second point of error claims a technical classification error, arguing the tribal court improperly classified skill-based terminals as gaming. They argue these devices are beyond the IGRA threshold, lacking the plain meaning of chance-based commerce. Supporting argument 4 focuses on Cabazon versus California, which defines the regulatory threshold for tribal gaming authority. The appellant argues that their skill-based devices fall outside the scope of traditional Cabazon regulation because they lack the, quote, chance-based character of IGRA-governed gaming. The next argument references U.S. version 103 devices, which established the, quote, dominant factor test. This test determines if skill or chance is the dominant factor in a game's outcome. Devices where player strategy significantly influences results are excluded from the definition of commercial gambling. Moving to the respondent's case theory, they argue that inherent sovereignty protects economic integrity. Sovereignty includes plenary territorial authority, exclusive control over all persons and property within the nation's physical borders. This also includes the preservation of economic engines. The nation must strictly oversee commercial participants to maintain the integrity of gaming revenues, which fund vital social and governmental programs. The appellant's case theory counters this by stating that fee simple ownership limits tribal regulatory reach. Land held in fee simple by non-members represents a diminished tribal interest, once alienated from trust status. This aligns with the presumption against jurisdiction from Montana versus United States, which generally states that tribal sovereign powers do not extend to non-member activities on fee lands within a reservation.